30 of America's finest doctors surrounded a dying billionaire, yet none of them could save him. But in the silence of despair, his black housekeeper noticed something everyone else missed. The question is, will anyone listen before it's too late? If this story resonated with you, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as beautiful as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The lights of Manhattan glowed like fireflies against the velvet night, skyscrapers stabbing into the September sky. On the top floor of one of those towers, behind tinted glass and steel doors, lived Richard Calloway, the kind of man newspapers called a titan. Billionaire, real estate mogul, ruthless dealmaker. His name was plastered on buildings from Wall Street to Los Angeles, his shadow long enough to stretch across the country. Inside his penthouse overlooking Central Park, the atmosphere was sterile, polished, and cold. Italian marble gleamed under chandeliers imported from Vienna. Rare art hung on the walls. Yet the place felt more like a museum than a home. Richard sat in a leather chair by the massive window, a tumbler of bourbon in his hand. At 71, his frame was still broad, his hair a thick silver crown. But his once commanding presence was thinning around the edges. His hands trembled faintly when he lifted the glass. He noticed, of course, but he said nothing. Richard Calloway never admitted weakness, not even to himself. The silence broke with the soft shuffle of footsteps. Loretta Gaines entered, carrying a tray with a teapot and 2 cups. She moved quietly, with the confidence of someone who knew every corner of the house by heart. For 25 years, she had been his housekeeper, though her role was more than that. She had scrubbed his floors, cooked his meals, polished his silver, and carried burdens that were never hers to bear. "Mr. Calloway," she said gently, placing the tray on the glass table. "You've had enough bourbon for tonight. Let me pour you tea." "Doctor's orders." Richard's jaw tightened. "Doctor's orders are for people who can afford to waste time listening to them. I don't." Loretta didn't flinch. She had heard sharper words from him, words that could slice through steel. She poured the tea anyway, her dark hand steady as she set the cup in front of him. "It'll help you sleep. Even a man like you needs rest." Richard studied her as though she had spoken out of turn. She was 60 now, her hair a crown of silver braids, her back still straight despite decades of labor. There was a warmth in her eyes that the marble walls could never reflect. Richard never said it out loud, but sometimes, in the quietest hours, she reminded him of the mother he had lost too young. Stern, firm, but steady in her care. The door opened again, and another presence filled the room. Evelyn Calloway, Richard's only child, stood in the doorway with her arms folded. Her expression was sharp, her suit immaculate, her blonde hair tied back in a severe bun. At 38, she was the spitting image of her father's determination, but not his warmth, because she had never really known it. "You're drinking again," Evelyn said flatly, "and ignoring your doctors." Typical. Richard's lips curled into a smirk. "Good evening to you too, sweetheart. Don't you have some startup in San Francisco to run into the ground?" The air crackled. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "I didn't come here to be insulted. I came because I heard your health is declining, and apparently, I was right." Loretta shifted uncomfortably between them. She had seen this dance too many times. Father and daughter circling each other with sharp words, neither willing to step closer, neither willing to bridge the canyon between them. She remembered when Evelyn was a little girl, running through the penthouse halls with ribbons in her hair, begging her father to come watch her recitals. He never did. The bitterness of those broken promises still lingered. Richard waved his daughter off. "Declining? Don't be ridiculous. I've closed 3 deals this week that men half my age couldn't dream of touching. My health is fine." Loretta's eyes flickered to the empty pill bottles on the counter, the untouched meals she had carried back to the kitchen, the way his hand trembled when he set down the glass. She saw what Evelyn saw. But Richard's pride was a fortress, and no one breached it easily. "Fine," Evelyn said coldly. "Drink yourself to death if you want. Just don't expect me to play the grieving daughter at your funeral." She turned on her heel and stormed out, heels clicking against the marble like gunshots. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard stared at the door she had slammed shut, but his face was unreadable. Loretta, however, caught the subtle sag in his shoulders, the quiet exhale that betrayed the weight he carried when no one was watching. "Mr. Calloway," she said softly. She came because she cares. She wouldn't be here otherwise. Richard scoffed, masking the flicker of emotion in his eyes. She came because she's curious about my will. Don't mistake greed for love, Loretta. Loretta wanted to say more, but she swallowed her words. Some truths had to be revealed in their own time. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat across from him, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm of his solitude. Outside, the city roared with life, taxi horns, sirens, laughter spilling from rooftop bars. But inside, in the penthouse of a man who owned half the skyline, there was only silence, tension, and the faint wheeze of breath that grew harder for Richard Calloway to catch. Foreshadow hung heavy in the air. Something inside his body was unraveling, and no amount of power, money, or denial would keep it hidden much longer. The Plaza Hotel glimmered like a jewel against Fifth Avenue, its chandeliers spilling golden light over velvet carpets and tuxedoed guests. The air buzzed with the scent of champagne, perfume, and ambition. Tonight was not just another gathering. It was Richard Calloway's night. He had called together investors, politicians, and media figures for a grand dinner in the hotel's famed Palm Court, a space drenched in old-world elegance. White-gloved waiters floated between tables, pouring vintage wine and serving caviar as orchestral music drifted from the balcony. Everyone knew this was more than dinner. This was Richard's stage to prove he was still the master of his empire, still untouchable. Loretta had insisted he shouldn't go. His cough had worsened, his steps had grown slower, his nights restless. But Richard brushed her aside with a glare that said no one told him what to do, not even fate. Evelyn came, but only reluctantly, her expression unreadable as she sat at his right hand in a navy gown, her lips pressed into a thin line. Richard rose for his speech, the room silencing at the scrape of his chair. Even at 71, his presence commanded attention. He gripped the lectern, his voice booming with the same authority that once bent markets to his will. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, tonight we celebrate not just success, but resilience. In a world of shifting sands, Calloway Enterprises stands firm because we believe in vision, in strength, in... His words faltered. A cough tore through his chest. He gripped the lectern tighter, forcing his voice to steady. In perseverance. Another cough. His face flushed crimson, his hand trembling against the polished wood. For the first time, Richard's voice cracked, not with emotion, but with something deeper, something physical. He tried to clear his throat, but his breath hitched. Dad, Evelyn whispered sharply, rising halfway from her chair. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard staggered, his body listing like a tower struck at its foundation. His bourbon-hardened bravado shattered in an instant. His glassy eyes darted across the ballroom as if searching for an anchor, and then he crumpled to the floor. Richard, Evelyn screamed, rushing to his side. The room erupted. Chairs screeched back. Voices shouted. Waiters dropped trays of crystal glasses that shattered against the marble floor. Someone yelled for a doctor. Another guest pulled out a phone, already dialing 911. The orchestra's music stopped in a discordant scrape of strings. Loretta, who had been waiting discreetly near the back of the room with other staff, dropped her tray and sprinted forward. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pushed through the crowd. She fell to her knees beside Richard, her hands already reaching for him with an instinct honed over decades of quiet care. His lips were pale, his breathing ragged. He clutched at his chest, but his eyes were unfocused. "Sir, stay with me," Loretta urged, her voice trembling but firm. "Don't you dare leave us here, you hear?" Evelyn's face was pale, her hand pressing against her father's shoulder. "Do something. Somebody help him." And then help arrived, 30 of the best. Within minutes, the room filled with chaos as a cadre of top doctors, some already present among the wealthy guests, others rushing in, surrounded Richard. They shouted orders, their language cold and clinical. Vials, syringes, stethoscopes, defibrillators, medical weapons laid out in desperate precision. The Calloway fortune could buy anything, and tonight it bought the finest medical minds America had to offer. Pulse is weak. Get the oxygen mask. Start 4 fluids, now. Loretta was shoved back, nearly toppled by a suited physician as the swarm closed in. She watched helplessly as they hooked Richard to machines, as Evelyn stood frozen, tears spilling down her face. Flashes from cameras pierced the chaos, reporters outside already catching word of the incident, hungry for headlines. Billionaire Richard Calloway collapses at Plaza dinner. The media storm had begun before the ambulance sirens even wailed. Loretta pressed her hand to her mouth, her body trembling. She could see what the doctors didn't. His breaths weren't just shallow. They were uneven, almost choking. Something about the way his chest rose and fell, the subtle twitch at his throat, tugged at her instincts. She had seen him like this before. Late at night, when he dismissed her concern and insisted it was just fatigue. "Please," she whispered, her voice drowned by the shouts of commands and the hiss of oxygen. "You're missing it." No one heard her. Richard's eyes rolled back, his body jerking as the doctors shouted for a defibrillator. Evelyn sobbed openly now, clutching Loretta's hand without realizing it. "Clear," one doctor barked. Richard's chest jolted with the shock. His body fell limp again. The orchestra's instruments sat abandoned. The caviar congealed on plates. The titans of industry who had come to toast power and wealth now stood powerless, watching as one of their own was reduced to flesh, bone, and failing breath. In the middle of the chaos, Evelyn clung to Loretta, trembling. "He can't die? Not like this. Not before." She choked on her words. Loretta squeezed her hand firmly, her eyes fixed on Richard. She didn't say it aloud, but deep down, she knew something the doctors didn't. And though her voice was small against the roar of medical orders and panic, she whispered it again to herself. "You're missing it." But for now, the billionaire's fate hung in the balance. His empire paused, his life teetering on a knife's edge under the unforgiving lights of the Plaza Hotel. By the time the ambulance doors slammed shut outside the Plaza Hotel, the flashing red lights had already drawn a sea of reporters. Cameras shoved forward, voices clamored, and headlines practically wrote themselves. Billionaire Titan collapses at gala. Security guards struggled to push back the crowd as the vehicle sped through Manhattan traffic, its sirens slicing the night. Inside the ambulance, Richard Calloway lay strapped to the stretcher, oxygen mask pressed to his face. His skin was clammy, his chest heaving with every shallow breath. Dr. Marcus Trent, the nation's most celebrated cardiologist, crouched over him, barking orders into a headset. Blood pressure dropping. Push another bolus of fluids. Prepare AP on standby. Evelyn sat wedged in the corner, pale and rigid, her manicured nails digging into her palms. Her father's body looked smaller than she remembered, frail even, under the harsh ambulance lights. For the first time in her life, she saw not the towering mogul who terrified boardrooms, but a man on the edge of disappearing. Loretta was there too, squeezed into the narrow space. She held onto the rail beside Richard's stretcher, whispering prayers under her breath. Her eyes darted between the monitors and his face, watching his breaths catch unevenly. Something about it gnawed at her. When the ambulance screeched to a halt at the private wing of Mount Sinai Hospital, a team of specialists was already waiting. 30 doctors, cardiologists, neurologists, pulmonologists, even an infectious disease expert, filed into the suite prepared just for Richard. It looked less like a hospital room and more like a command center, glowing with machines and screens. Evelyn followed close behind, heels clicking against the floor. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her voice was sharp. "Do something. He's Richard Calloway. Money is no object. Fix him." Dr. Trent adjusted his glasses, his jaw set tight. "We'll do everything possible. But you need to step back, Miss Calloway. Let us work." The doors shut in her face. She stood frozen in the hall, her chest rising and falling in jagged breaths. Loretta moved beside her, placing a hand gently on her arm. Evelyn jerked away at first, then collapsed onto the nearest bench, burying her face in her hands. "I can't believe this is happening," Evelyn muttered. "He was fine yesterday. He was still yelling at his assistant this morning." Loretta sat down next to her, her voice calm, steady, like the hum of an old hymn. "Sometimes sickness hides quiet until it don't. He's been ignoring the signs for a long while." Evelyn looked up, her eyes red. "And what do you know about it? You're not a doctor." The words stung, sharper than Evelyn meant them, but Loretta didn't flinch. She had heard versions of that dismissal her whole life. Instead, she simply folded her hands in her lap and said, "I know what it looks like when a body's tired of carrying secrets. He's been sick longer than he'll ever admit. Inside the room, the doctors circled Richard like soldiers around a fallen general. Machines beeped, charts updated, voices overlapped. Cardiac irregularities, but not consistent with infarction. Lungs sound congested. Possible pulmonary edema? Rule out infection. Start antibiotics, just in case. Each opinion sparked another argument, another test ordered, another line of treatment. For all their brilliance, the room pulsed with confusion. Richard's body refused to obey their theories. Through the glass window, Evelyn watched helplessly. The man who had built skyscrapers with sheer willpower now looked impossibly small beneath the tangle of tubes and wires. She pressed her hand to the glass, whispering, "Don't you dare leave me, you stubborn old man." Loretta stood behind her, silent, her eyes fixed not on the machines but on Richard himself. She noticed the faint tightening in his throat when he swallowed, the way his breaths came shallow but uneven, as if something deeper was being overlooked. She remembered the nights she had stood in his room, watching him toss and turn, hearing the strange hitch in his breathing. She had tried to tell him once, but he waved her off with a scoff. Now, the doctors stormed around, too busy listening to their own voices to hear the quiet details. Hours passed. Midnight bled into dawn. The suite became a war zone of exhaustion. Some doctors argued, some scribbled furiously in charts, some simply shook their heads. Evelyn paced the hall until her legs ached. Reporters camped outside the hospital, their cameras hungry for a glimpse of the man behind the glass. Inside, Richard stirred for the first time, groaning faintly, his eyes fluttering open. He tried to speak, but the oxygen mask muffled his words. Loretta leaned forward instinctively, pressing her palm to the glass. For a moment, his gaze locked onto hers, not the doctor's, not Evelyn, but her. His lips formed something she couldn't hear, but she read the shape of it. Help! Loretta's heart twisted. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and whispered, "I'm here, Mr. Calloway. I see you." The words evaporated into the sterile air, unheard by anyone else. Behind her, Evelyn's voice cut sharp through the tension. "Why aren't they fixing him? They're supposed to be the best in the country, and they don't even know what's wrong." Loretta looked at her, the truth heavy in her chest. Because sometimes the best forget to see what's right in front of them. The hallway fell silent, the weight of her words lingering between them. Inside the room, Richard's monitors beeped a slow, uneven rhythm, an unspoken reminder that time was running out, and the 30 best minds in medicine still hadn't found the answer. And in the quiet spaces between the beeping machines, Loretta gains knew deep in her bones. They were missing something. By mid-morning, the private wing of Mount Sinai felt less like a hospital and more like a battlefield. Richard Calloway lay tethered to machines, his chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm while a team of doctors worked in rotating shifts. Charts piled up, monitors beeped relentlessly, and yet the truth remained. No one knew what was killing him. Evelyn stood by the window, arms crossed tight over her chest, her once flawless hair falling loose around her face. Rage simmered beneath her grief. Every unanswered question from the doctors only deepened the fury in her voice. "You're telling me you still don't know?" She snapped, her voice ricocheting across the room. 30 of the finest medical minds, and not one of you can give me an answer? Dr. Marcus Trent, still composed but visibly strained, adjusted his glasses. "Miss Calloway, your father's condition is complex. We've stabilized him for now, but we need more time to run tests." "Time?" Evelyn barked, her voice cracking. "He doesn't have time. He's Richard Calloway. He built half the city while you were still learning how to hold a stethoscope. You don't get to stand here and shrug." Loretta, sitting quietly on a corner chair, winced at Evelyn's sharpness. She had been awake all night, refusing to leave even when asked. Her eyes were red from fatigue, but her mind sharper than ever. She saw what others missed. The twitch in Richard's throat each time he tried to swallow. The way his breaths came unevenly, as though something clogged the flow. She rose slowly, smoothing her wrinkled uniform. "MS. Evelyn," she began softly. "I think I see something the doctors might be overlooking." Evelyn's head snapped toward her, disbelief etched on her face. "You?" Loretta nodded, her hands folded in front of her. "I've watched him day in, day out. Nights when his breath caught like it is now. Mornings when he couldn't swallow his coffee without choking. I think that's enough. Evelyn cut her off with a slash of her hand. You're not a doctor. Don't stand here and undermine them. The words stung, but Loretta didn't lower her eyes. Sometimes it takes more than titles to see what's right there. Dr. Trent cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the tension. Miss Calloway, I understand your FR. Do it, Evelyn said instantly. Loretta stepped forward, shaking her head. Wait. Surgery could weaken him further if you don't even know what you're looking for. He needs rest. Careful watching. Maybe even. Loretta. Evelyn's voice was sharp as a blade. She turned, eyes burning with exhaustion and anger. You are a housekeeper. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me, or these doctors, on how to save my father. The room went quiet, the insult echoing heavy in the sterile air. Loretta's shoulders stiffened, but she refused to look away. Her whole life had been spent in shadows, invisible, her wisdom dismissed before it was spoken. But not this time. Call me what you want, Loretta said firmly. But I know that man. Better than you do, better than they do. I've been watching over him for 20 years. You think you know him 'cause he's your daddy, but I've seen the pieces of him he don't show nobody. And right now, I see something you're too blind to admit. He's fighting, but not against what y'all think. Evelyn's jaw trembled, fury and fear battling inside her. For a moment, she looked as though she might scream again. Instead, she turned to the doctors, her voice trembling with command. Do what you have to do. Ignore her. Two nurses stepped forward toward Loretta, gesturing toward the door. Ma'am, you need to leave the room. Family only. Loretta's chest tightened, her heart pounding. She glanced at Richard, his eyes half open behind the mask, searching for something or someone. When his gaze landed on her, faint recognition flickered. His lips moved weakly under the mask. Loretta froze. She could read it. Stay? But the nurses took her by the arms, guiding her gently but firmly toward the door. Evelyn didn't look at her. As Loretta was led into the hallway, the doors shut behind her with a decisive click. She stood alone under the harsh fluorescent lights, her chest burning. Inside, she heard muffled voices. Commands. Machines powering up. The beginning of interventions she knew in her bones were wrong. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to cry. Instead, she whispered to herself like a vow. They don't see it. But I do. And I ain't letting him go without saying it out loud. She sank onto a bench in the corridor, folding her hands in her lap, and prayed, not just for Richard's life, but for strength. Strength to fight back, even against the 30 men in white coats, even against Evelyn Calloway's fury. Because somewhere inside her, she knew this was only the beginning. The hours bled together in the quiet war of the hospital. The steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was the only proof that Richard Calloway still held on. Evelyn never left his side, her hands trembling every time the machine stuttered, every time the doctors murmured outside the door. Loretta, despite being banished, refused to go home. She stayed in the corridor, sitting on the same bench until her back ached and her eyes blurred. Nurses passed her with pitying glances. Security suggested politely that she leave, but something in her stillness, something unmovable, made them stop short. When morning came, the hospital staff relented. The doctors realized they could not keep her away. Richard's eyes searched for her whenever they adjusted his bed. They allowed her back into the room, though Evelyn bristled at her presence. If she stays quiet, Evelyn snapped. Loretta gave a small nod, but her silence carried more strength than words. She took her seat near the window, folding her hands, watching with the sharp gaze of someone who had spent a lifetime observing. For the first time since the collapse, Richard stirred. His eyes fluttered open, the color of faded glass, but alive. Evelyn rushed forward. Daddy, I'm here, she whispered, clutching his hand. His lips parted, dry and cracked. A sound escaped. Hoarse, broken. Evelyn leaned closer, straining to hear. But Loretta was already moving, pouring water from the bedside pitcher into a cup. She slid a straw between Richard's lips with gentle precision. Slow now, she murmured, her voice low and steady. Richard took a sip, weak but obedient. For the first time in 2 days, his breathing eased. Evelyn glanced at Loretta, her jaw tightening. I could have done that, she muttered. Loretta met her eyes. But you didn't. The words hung heavy, but Richard coughed faintly, a sound that silenced both women. He tried to speak again. This time the words formed clearer, though faint. Hurts here. His fingers twitched toward his throat. Evelyn looked to the doctors hovering nearby, panic in her eyes. What does that mean? Do something. But Loretta's eyes sharpened. She leaned in, studying his throat as he swallowed with difficulty. She had seen it before, late nights when he choked on his bourbon, mornings when even toast seemed impossible. Her mind raced. You seeing this? She asked the doctors. It ain't just his heart. Something's blocking him, higher up. Maybe his esophagus. Maybe. Dr. Trent cut her off with a sigh. Ms. Brown, please. We've run scans. Nothing structural showed up. This isn't your arena. Loretta's voice deepened, stronger now. Arena or not, that man's been cuffing like this for months. I told him, he wouldn't listen. Now look at him. You can keep poking and prodding, but you're fighting the wrong battle. Evelyn stood abruptly, her hands balled into fists. Enough. I won't have you second-guessing professionals who've dedicated their lives to medicine. You are not his savior. Loretta didn't flinch. Maybe not. But somebody in this room needs to listen before you kill him with all your certainty. The two women stared each other down across Richard's bed, their faces inches from breaking into open war. The tension was suffocating, thick enough to drown the quiet beeps of the monitor. And then Richard's hand twitched weakly. His fingers brushed both of theirs, pulling them closer together. His eyes, still glassy but aware, moved between them. It was as if he was begging, pleading, for them to stop fighting. Evelyn's throat tightened. She blinked back tears, and for a moment, her voice softened. I don't know what to do, she whispered, almost to herself. Loretta's gaze gentled too. Then let's do what we can. Together. The room stilled. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the machines, the doctors, the woman she had dismissed as nothing more than staff. And though her pride screamed to push Loretta away, she didn't. She sank back into her chair, silent, holding her father's hand. For the next few hours, forced by circumstance, they worked in uneasy tandem. Evelyn kept vigil at the bedside, asking doctors questions with her sharp, commanding voice. Loretta tended to Richard's smallest needs, adjusting his pillow, wiping his brow, coaxing him into tiny sips of water. Neither woman spoke to the other, but their movements began to form an unspoken rhythm, like two musicians playing different instruments in the same song. As night fell again over Manhattan, Richard's condition remained fragile, his life balanced on a knife's edge. Yet in that room, for the first time, Evelyn and Loretta were no longer enemies kept apart by title and pride. Circumstance had chained them together, two women from worlds apart, fighting for the same man. And deep inside, Loretta knew this was only the beginning. Because soon, very soon, the truth she carried would demand to be spoken aloud, whether Evelyn liked it or not. The hospital room had become a cage. Machines hummed, nurses whispered, and time seemed to stretch thin as glass. Outside the window, Manhattan glittered with life, but inside, everything revolved around Richard Calloway's shallow breaths. Evelyn sat rigid in her chair, her posture screaming authority even as her face betrayed exhaustion. Dark circles clung to her eyes, her gown wrinkled from days of wear. She scribbled furiously into a leather notebook, documenting every doctor's word, every dosage, every flicker on the monitors. Loretta, meanwhile, tended to the smaller details, the ones no one else noticed. She dabbed Richard's lips with a cool cloth, adjusted the sheets when he sweated, and whispered soft encouragements in his ear. Her presence was quiet, steady, a rhythm Evelyn couldn't ignore. But with every gentle act, Evelyn's jaw tightened. The sight of Loretta touching her father with such ease Evelyn herself could not muster, not at her. Late that evening, as Dr. Trent updated them on Richard's unstable vitals, Evelyn's simmering tension boiled over. You've had 3 days, she snapped, her pen clattering to the floor. 3 days, and still no answers. My father is not a puzzle you get to tinker with until you're satisfied. He is running out of time. Dr. Trent rubbed his temples. MS. Calloway, we are doing everything modern medicine allows. Modern medicine is failing him. Evelyn's voice cut through the room like glass. And then, in the quiet that followed, Loretta spoke. Calm. Steady. Dangerous in its certainty. Or maybe modern medicine ain't looking in the right place. Evelyn's head snapped toward her. Not you again. Loretta didn't flinch. I seen him like this before. Nights when he couldn't swallow, when he coughed till dawn. It ain't just his heart, it's something in his throat. Something small, easy to miss if you only see him as a case file instead of a man. Dr. Trent exhaled sharply. Ms. Brown, with respect, our scans showed no obstruction. Scans miss things, Loretta pressed. Her voice grew sharper, edged with years of being unheard. You all too proud to admit it, but I've been watching that man more years than you've been in practice. Something is there. I feel it. Evelyn stood, her voice dripping venom. You feel it? That's your medical degree? Intuition. Loretta's eyes narrowed. Sometimes the heart sees what eyes can't. You don't need a degree to care. The words sliced deeper than Loretta intended. Evelyn flinched, her composure cracking. She spun toward the window, her reflection fractured in the glass. Don't talk to me about caring, she whispered, her voice raw. You think you know what it's like to love him? To grow up in his shadow, never enough, always second to his empire. She turned, tears threatening. You think you've carried that weight? Loretta's lips parted, but no words came. The pain in Evelyn's voice was real, sharp enough to silence even Loretta's defiance. The doctors, uncomfortable, cleared their throats. We'll run another round of tests, Dr. Trent muttered, retreating quickly. The room emptied, leaving only the three of them. Richard unconscious, Evelyn shaking, Loretta watching. The silence stretched. Finally, Loretta spoke, her tone gentler. I ain't trying to take your place, Miss Evelyn. I know he's your daddy. But I'm telling you, if you keep refusing to see what's right there, you might lose him. Evelyn's eyes filled with fire again, her grief turning sharp. And if I trust you and you're wrong? If I let a housekeeper dictate his care, and it kills him? Loretta stepped closer, her voice unwavering. Then I'll carry that burden. But right now, it looks to me like y'all too scared of being wrong to try being right. The air crackled with tension. Evelyn's breathing quickened, her fists clenched. For a heartbeat, Loretta thought she might slap her. But Evelyn turned away, collapsing back into the chair. She buried her face in her hands, whispering words meant only for herself. God, I don't know what to do. Richard stirred faintly at the sound of her voice, his hand twitching against the sheets. Loretta reached out instinctively, covering his hand with hers. Evelyn looked up, saw the gesture, and something broke inside her. Fine, she muttered bitterly. Say what you think it is. Say it, and I'll listen. But if you're wrong, her voice cracked. If you're wrong, I'll never forgive you. Loretta met her gaze, calm but fierce. Then I best not be wrong. Outside, thunder rolled across Manhattan, lightning flashing against the skyline. Inside the hospital room, the storm between Evelyn and Loretta raged just as fierce. Two women, bound by love for the same man, torn apart by pride, mistrust, and the terrifying possibility that one of them was right. The storm outside deepened into the night, rain streaking down the tall windows of Mount Sinai like tears the sky itself could not hold back. Inside Richard's private suite, the dimmed lights cast long shadows across the machines that kept him tethered to life. Loretta sat quietly by his side, her hand resting over his as if to anchor him. Evelyn paced like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her silk blouse wrinkled and damp with sweat. She hadn't eaten in hours, hadn't slept in days, but still she refused to sit. The silence was unbearable, and Loretta finally broke it with a low voice. You wear yourself out like that, you won't be any use to him. Evelyn turned sharply, her eyes flashing. Don't you dare tell me how to love my father. Loretta held her ground. I ain't. I'm telling you what I see. And what I see is a daughter about to break herself in half, just trying to be strong. Evelyn stopped pacing. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her lips trembling as though holding back words she'd sworn never to say. Then, almost against her will, they spilled out. You think I'm strong? You think I want this role? Her voice cracked. She pressed a hand to her forehead, as if trying to hold herself together. I didn't even want his empire. All my life, he told me I wasn't enough. Not sharp enough. Not ruthless enough. He said a man would have to take over, because a daughter couldn't carry Callaway Enterprises. Her voice trembled into a whisper. So, I spent every day trying to prove him wrong. And the harder I tried, the more he pushed me away. Loretta's breath caught. She had never heard Evelyn speak so plainly, so raw. Evelyn's eyes glistened as she stared down at her father, his chest rising and falling with mechanical rhythm. Do you know what it's like to have the world look at you and only see your father's shadow? To work twice as hard, only to be dismissed with a smile and a pat on the head. She gave a short, bitter laugh. When I was 13, I begged him to come to my school recital. Just 1 hour. He promised he would. I sat on that stage, staring at the door, waiting. He never came. When I got home, he told me he was closing a deal that was worth more than schoolgirl music. That was the day I realized I'd never come first. Loretta felt the weight of Evelyn's confession settle deep in her chest. She had seen the hardened shell Evelyn wore, but now she understood the cracks beneath. Child, Loretta said softly, I know what it's like to feel small in somebody else's world. To give your whole self and still feel invisible. Evelyn turned on her, eyes narrowed. Don't you dare compare your life to mine. You don't know what it's like to grow up in the spotlight, with the world watching for you to fail. Loretta's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she rose from her chair, smoothing her uniform. Her voice was calm, but her words carried the weight of buried years. You're right. I didn't grow up with the world watching me. I grew up with nobody watching me at all. I was 10 when my mama died. My daddy, he was a drinking man. He left 2 weeks later. Just me and my little brother, waiting on a doorstep for a mama who wasn't never coming back. Evelyn blinked, startled. I raised him best I could, Loretta continued, her eyes distant with memory. Cleaned houses, scrubbed floors, begged neighbors for bread. Every day was a fight just to keep him fed, keep him warm. But when he was 17, he joined the wrong crowd. Thought fast money would fix our troubles. Police shot him in Harlem one night. Wrong place, wrong time, they said. But I know better. Her voice trembled for the first time. I buried him myself. And I swore I'd never let another soul slip away on my watch. The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed to hush. Loretta's eyes returned to Evelyn, steady and strong again. So don't tell me I don't understand pain. Don't tell me I don't know what it's like to be invisible, to be overlooked, to be told you ain't enough. I know it. I lived it. And that's why I can't stand by and watch your daddy fade while y'all too busy arguing over pride. Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, her anger faltered. She sank into the chair opposite Loretta, her face pale, her hands trembling. For a long moment, the only sound was the monitor's steady rhythm. Then Evelyn spoke again, quieter this time. So you really believe it's not his heart? Loretta nodded slowly. I do. Something's blocking him. Something small. Something y'all missed. Evelyn studied her, the war in her eyes softening just slightly. Then prove it. Because if you're wrong, her voice broke again. I won't just hate you. I'll never forgive myself for listening. Loretta met her gaze without flinching. Then I best make sure I'm right. Outside, the storm rolled on, but inside, something fragile shifted between them. Not peace, not yet, but the faintest recognition that pain had carved both their lives, and maybe, just maybe, they were not as different as they thought. Morning broke gray over Manhattan. The storm spent, but leaving behind a city slick with rain. The skyline outside the hospital window looked washed clean, but inside Richard Calloway's room, tension still clung to the air like humidity. Evelyn sat in her father's chair, her body folded with exhaustion, her head resting against the edge of the bed. She hadn't meant to fall asleep, but the weight of days without rest finally won. Richard's frail hand rested loosely in hers, his skin cool but alive. Loretta, sitting by the window, watched the scene quietly. For years she had thought of Evelyn as untouchable. Sharp clothes, sharper words, the kind of woman who carried herself like the world owed her reverence. But now, stripped of armor, she was just a daughter clinging to her father. Vulnerable, breakable, human. When Evelyn stirred awake, she blinked blearily and found Loretta watching her. For a moment, defensiveness sparked, but it softened almost immediately. She rubbed her eyes, sighing. I must look a mess. Loretta gave a small smile. Honey, mess is just another word for human. You ain't foolin' nobody trying to be steel all the time. Evelyn let out something close to a laugh, short, tired, but genuine. Steel is easier. You don't have to feel when you're steel. Loretta tilted her head. Maybe, but it's feelin' that keeps us alive, even when it hurts. The words settled between them, heavy but true. Evelyn glanced at her father again, then at Loretta. You really did raise your brother alone? Loretta nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Raised him best I knew how. Cooked, cleaned, fought with landlords, begged when I had to. Thought I could keep him safe just by sheer will. Turns out, sometimes the world's louder than your love. Evelyn's throat tightened. I wouldn't know how to fight like that. Everything I've ever had was given to me, even when I didn't want it. Loretta studied her carefully. Maybe so, but just 'cause you born with silver don't mean your pain less real. You still bleed same as me. For the first time, Evelyn didn't argue. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. I used to think if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, he'd finally look at me and say he was proud. But all I. The words cracked open something raw, and Evelyn quickly pressed her lips together, as though ashamed of the confession. Loretta reached across the bed, her dark, work-worn hand brushing Evelyn's pale, manicured one. Child, don't you dare believe that. That man, he may not have known how to say it, but he loved you. I seen it in the way he kept your pictures on his desk, even when he pretended not to care. In the way he asked about you when you weren't around, though he never admitted it out loud. Evelyn's eyes filled. Then why couldn't he ever just say it? Loretta shook her head softly. Some folks don't know how. Some folks think love gotta be big gestures, houses and legacies, instead of just words. Don't mean it ain't there. Silence stretched again, but it was no longer hostile. It was fragile, tentative. Evelyn studied Loretta, her lips trembling. Finally, she whispered, I don't hate you. Loretta smiled faintly. Never thought you did. Thought you hated yourself more. Evelyn looked away quickly, blinking fast to hide her tears. Maybe you're right. At that moment, Richard stirred. His lips parted, a faint groan escaping. Both women leaned forward instinctively, their earlier distance forgotten. Evelyn gripped his hand tighter. Daddy, it's me. I'm here, she whispered. Richard's eyes fluttered open, unfocused but alive. They moved between Evelyn and Loretta, lingering on each as if weighing something unsaid. His hand twitched, brushing both of theirs together. For a heartbeat, neither woman pulled away. Their hands, different in color, shape, and history, rested side by side on his frail skin. And in that moment, without words, they were bound, not by blood or status, but by love for the same man. Richard's breathing steadied briefly, as if comforted by their unity. The monitor's rhythm smoothed. Evelyn glanced at Loretta, her eyes soft, almost grateful. Maybe, Evelyn said quietly, her voice fragile. Maybe we should stop fighting each other and start fighting for him. Loretta nodded, her grip firm. Now you talkin' sense. For the first time since Richard's collapse, the air in the room shifted. The storm between them eased, just a fraction, enough for something fragile to take root. Not friendship, not yet, but understanding. And for Richard Calloway, lying between them, that might have been enough to keep his heart beating one more night. By late afternoon, the world outside Richard Calloway's hospital room had begun to stir with whispers. News had leaked. Reporters swarmed the sidewalks of New York, Presbyterian, cameras flashing, microphones thrust at anyone who might have a scrap of information. Billionaire financier Richard Calloway on life support after mysterious collapse. One anchor announced on a live feed looping on the television in the waiting lounge. 30 top doctors brought in for consultation, yet no answers. Inside the room, Loretta closed the blinds to shield Richard from the frenzy. Evelyn paced restlessly, her phone buzzing non-stop with calls from board members, business partners, even rivals cloaking their curiosity as concern. Tell them nothing. She snapped into the phone before hanging up. No statements. Not yet. Loretta frowned. Child, keeping secrets only feeds the wolves. They already smell blood. Evelyn spun, frustration crackling. What do you want me to do, Loretta? Tell them my father is dying, and we don't know why? That some housekeeper figured out more than 30 doctors? They'd eat us alive. The words slipped out sharper than intended, and regret flickered instantly across Evelyn's face. Loretta stiffened, but didn't bite back. Instead, she said quietly, I didn't mean me. I meant you. If you hold all that inside, it'll eat you alive. Before Evelyn could respond, the door burst open. It was Marcus Caldwell, Richard's business rival, flanked by 2 lawyers. His presence filled the room like a storm front. Tailored suit, smug confidence, and eyes that glimmered with something darker than concern. "Evelyn," he said smoothly, ignoring Loretta entirely. "I came as soon as I heard. Richard's health affects more than this family. It affects the entire market. Shareholders are already panicking." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "This is not the time, Marcus. He's not a stock price, he's my father." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice, but not his arrogance. "Your father's empire is crumbling by the hour. If you don't step up, others will. You're not strong enough to protect what he built. Let me help." Loretta bristled. "Help yourself, you mean? I've seen snakes before, and you hiss just like one." Marcus gave her a disdainful glance, as though housekeepers weren't worth the oxygen. "And you are? Somebody who cares more about the man than the money." Loretta shot back, her voice steady. Evelyn's lips curved in the faintest smirk, but her eyes never left Marcus. "Leave, Marcus, before I have security remove you." For a moment, silence hung thick. Marcus studied her, perhaps surprised by her steel. Then he smiled coldly. "Suit yourself. But when your father's fortune collapses, don't say, 'I didn't offer you a lifeline.'" He turned and left, his lawyers in tow. The door clicked shut, and Evelyn exhaled, her hands trembling. Loretta reached for her gently. "Don't let him shake you. Snakes only got power if you let him near." But the damage was done. Evelyn sank into the chair, pulling her knees up, her facade slipping. "He's right about one thing. The board's already circling. If they push me out, everything my father built could be stripped away before he even wakes up. And if he never wakes up," her voice broke. Loretta knelt in front of her, looking straight into her eyes. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn. Don't let a vulture like him tell you otherwise. You just proved it standing up to him." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she nodded, blinking back tears. Outside, the chaos only grew. News vans camped on the curb. Journalists speculated wildly. Was Richard poisoned? Did he suffer a rare condition? Was it stress? Some claimed it was punishment for years of ruthless business. Others painted him as a tragic titan struck down at the height of his power. Inside, the doctors argued in hushed tones. Some believed Loretta's observation about Richard's reaction to peanuts might be a clue. Others dismissed it as coincidence. The uncertainty gnawed at everyone. That night, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the press lights flicker below like restless fireflies. Loretta brought her a cup of coffee, the kind Evelyn never drank, but now desperately needed. "Funny thing," Evelyn murmured, staring at the swarm. "They don't care about him. Not really. They just want the story." Loretta handed her the cup. "Maybe so, but stories are powerful. Tell the wrong one, it'll bury you. Tell the right one, it might just save you." Evelyn looked at her, searching. "And which story do we tell?" Loretta's eyes softened. "The truth. Always the truth. It's the only thing that don't change when the storm blows." The words settled deep in Evelyn's chest, heavier than any business advice she'd ever been given. As the night stretched, both women realized the complications weren't just Richard's failing body. They were the vultures circling outside, the empire at stake, and the secrets still buried between them. And though they had begun to find common ground, the storm outside promised their fragile truce would be tested in ways neither of them was ready for. The hospital room was dim, the only light a muted glow from the monitor tracing Richard's heartbeat. It was after midnight, the kind of quiet that magnified every sigh, every rustle, every thought left unspoken. Evelyn sat slumped in the chair by the bed, her arms crossed tightly, while Loretta busied herself tidying the untouched tray of food a nurse had left behind. The silence between them had grown thick, no longer hostile but heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Evelyn broke it, her voice low and sharp with fatigue. "You know, you speak about my father like you understand him. But you don't. You couldn't." Loretta paused, her hands stilling on the tray. Slowly, she turned to face Evelyn. "Is that what you think? That I don't understand Richard Calloway?" Evelyn's eyes flicked toward her, icy with challenge. "You're the housekeeper. You cleaned the floors, cooked his meals, made sure the lights were on. That doesn't mean you knew him." For a long moment, Loretta said nothing. She simply studied Evelyn, as though weighing whether to speak. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry decades, she set the tray down and leaned against the wall. "Child, there's something you don't know. Something your father never told you." Evelyn stiffened, suspicion flaring. "What are you talking about?" Loretta's eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. I knew your father long before I ever set foot in this house. Long before he was a billionaire. Long before people bowed when he walked in a room. Evelyn frowned, her chest tightening. That's not possible. Oh, it's possible, Loretta said softly. We grew up in the same part of Harlem. Back then, he wasn't Richard the Empire Builder. He was Ricky Calloway, the boy with shoes too small and a hunger bigger than his stomach. My mama used to give him cornbread when his daddy drank away their supper. He never forgot that kindness. That's why, when he became somebody, he hired me. Not out of pity. Out of loyalty. Evelyn stared, her mouth parting. Her father, hungry? Poor. It didn't fit the man she had known. He never told me that. Loretta nodded. Because he didn't want you to know. He wanted you to grow up untouched by it. He swore his children would never feel the shame he felt knocking on neighbors' doors begging for food. The room spun with the revelation. Evelyn gripped the armrest, her nails digging into the leather. Why wouldn't he tell me? Why keep that from me? Pride, Loretta said simply. He carried it like a scar he couldn't show nobody. He thought protecting you from it was love. But maybe he didn't see that hiding it only built a wall between y'all. Evelyn's chest ached with something she couldn't name, grief, anger, betrayal. All those years, I thought he didn't care. I thought I was never enough. And all along, he was hiding the fact that he used to be, like you? Loretta nodded. Exactly like me. Maybe that's why he kept me close. I reminded him where he came from. Maybe too much. Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice cracking. So you knew a side of him I never did. You knew who he really was. And I, his own daughter, I didn't. Loretta stepped closer, her tone gentle. Honey, don't twist it that way. He loved you fierce. He just didn't know how to bridge the gap between who he was and who he wanted you to see him as. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes, hot and unrelenting. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to hold them back, but her voice shook. All I ever wanted was the truth. Not the money, not the empire. Just the truth. Loretta reached out, hesitating only a moment before resting her hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Then maybe now's the time for truth. Maybe that's why God put me here beside you. For the first time, Evelyn didn't pull away. She let the warmth of Loretta's hand steady her as the weight of revelation sank in. Behind them, Richard stirred faintly, a murmur slipping from his lips. Evelyn turned instantly, clutching his hand. His eyes fluttered open, glazed but searching. He whispered something so faint it was almost lost to the hum of the machines. Ricky. Evelyn froze. Ricky. The name Loretta had used. The name of a boy she never knew existed. She looked at Loretta in shock, and Loretta's eyes filled with tears. Richard's hand squeezed weakly, then fell still again as he drifted back into unconsciousness. In that moment, Evelyn understood. Her father's past was no longer just his secret. It was hers too, and it would change everything she thought she knew about him, and about herself. The next morning brought a rare softness to the hospital room. Sunlight spilled through the blinds in golden stripes, washing over Richard's bed and touching his pale face with warmth. His breathing was shallow but steady, the monitors humming with a fragile rhythm. Evelyn sat at the foot of the bed, a cup of untouched coffee in her hands. The sleepless nights had carved shadows beneath her eyes, but something in her expression had shifted since Loretta's revelation. The steel edges were blunted, softened by the weight of truth. Loretta entered quietly, carrying a small basket wrapped in cloth. Evelyn looked up, her brow lifting. What's that? Biscuits, Loretta said simply, setting the basket on the side table. Figured this hospital food don't do nobody justice. Thought maybe a taste of home might help. Evelyn's lips twitched into something resembling a smile. Home, huh? This place doesn't exactly feel like home. Loretta chuckled softly as she unwrapped the cloth. Ain't about the walls, sugar. It's about what you put in it. Smells, sounds, people. You'd be surprised what something as small as a biscuit can fix. The scent of warm bread and butter filled the sterile room, and Evelyn inhaled without meaning to. She reached for one hesitantly, breaking it in half. I haven't eaten something like this in years. Loretta arched an eyebrow. What? They don't serve biscuits in the penthouse. Evelyn smirked faintly, chewing thoughtfully. Croissants, imported from Paris. Everything was always the best money could buy, but never this. She took another bite, her eyes flicking toward Loretta. It tastes real. Loretta sat down across from her, folding her hands in her lap. Your daddy used to come by our place, begging my mama for these same biscuits. She'd send him home with a plate, tell him to eat slow, make it last. He never did. Always gobbled it up like the world was starving him. Evelyn stared at her, her chest tightening. I never knew. I can't believe I never knew. Loretta's gaze softened. That's 'cause he wanted you to live in a different world. One where biscuits were just food, not survival. Silence lingered, but it was a gentler silence now. Evelyn looked down at the crumbs in her palm, then back up. You know something funny? My father and I barely spoke. But now that he's silent, it feels like he's shouting everything he never said. And I don't know how to handle it. Loretta reached across, resting her hand on Evelyn's wrist. You handle it by listening. Even now, he's talking through the things he left behind. You just gotta be still enough to hear. Evelyn swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. Then, to her own surprise, she laughed, softly, shakily. You sound like my grandmother. She used to tell me the dead speak louder than the living if you listen closely enough. Loretta's brows lifted, amused. Smart woman. Must run in the family. The laugh surprised them both. It wasn't long or loud, but it cracked the heaviness of the room. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt a sliver of relief, like a window had opened. They sat together for a while, sharing biscuits and memories, small pieces of humor stitched into the grief. Loretta told stories of Ricky Calloway, the boy with 2 small shoes and a stubborn streak. Evelyn listened like a child hearing a bedtime story, soaking up every word. You know, Evelyn said at last, her voice gentler than before, I always thought of you as the help. Someone who belonged to this house, but not to us. But the way you talk about him, I think maybe you were more family than I ever was. Loretta shook her head firmly. Don't you dare say that. Blood is blood, Evelyn. You his daughter. Don't matter how clumsy he was at showing it. You were his world, even if he didn't know how to say it out loud. The words cracked something open inside Evelyn. She blinked fast, setting the biscuit down before her trembling hands betrayed her. Do you really think if he wakes up he'll tell me? Loretta squeezed her wrist gently. I think if he wakes up, he'll have no choice. Life's funny that way. Sometimes it waits till the 11th hour to make a man speak the truth. Richard stirred faintly, as if answering the thought. His eyelids fluttered, a faint groan escaping. Evelyn and Loretta leaned in, side by side, their shoulders brushing. Daddy, Evelyn whispered. It's me. Richard's lips moved, though no sound came. His hand twitched, brushing against both of theirs as it had before. Evelyn's breath caught. We're here. I'm here. Loretta added softly. We both here, Ricky. Ain't nobody letting go. The faintest smile touched Richard's lips before his eyes drifted shut again. The monitor beeped steadily, unbroken. Evelyn exhaled shakily, tears slipping down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Instead, she leaned back, exhausted but strangely lighter. And for the first time, she realized Loretta wasn't her enemy. She was the only other person in the world who understood the man lying between them. In that realization, a bond was born, not of convenience or circumstance, but of shared love and shared wounds. And though fragile, it was real. The fragile calm didn't last. It was late afternoon when the storm came, not of weather, but of man. The door to Richard's hospital room burst open, and Marcus Caldwell strode in again, this time not with lawyers, but with 2 board members in tow. Their expressions were grave, and papers bulged from the leather portfolio under Marcus's arm. Evelyn shot to her feet. What do you think you're doing? Marcus smirked, his tone oily. What I warned you I'd have to do. The board can't sit idle while Richard Calloway wastes away. We're invoking emergency clauses. Control of Calloway Holdings will transfer, temporarily, of course, into capable hands. Capable hands. Evelyn's voice trembled with fury. You mean yours? Mine, Marcus agreed smoothly. Until your father passes, or until you prove you're competent to lead. But let's be honest, Evelyn, you've never had his trust. Why would we trust you now? The words cut deep, twisting every insecurity Evelyn had carried since childhood. She clenched her fists, her voice raw. Get out. Marcus ignored her. He spread the papers on the counter, sliding a pen across. Sign it, Evelyn. Make this transition easy. You'll still be rich, you'll still be comfortable. But the company, his legacy, will be safe. Loretta stepped forward, fire in her eyes. Safe? You mean stolen. You don't care about no legacy. You care about filling your pockets while this man lies fighting for his life. Marcus sneered, finally acknowledging her. Ah, the housekeeper speaks again. Tell me, Loretta, do you also scrub the boardroom floors? Or do you only meddle in affairs far above your station? Evelyn's chest heaved. She glanced at Richard, unconscious and fragile, then at the papers. For a terrifying moment, she faltered. Marcus's words echoed her deepest fears, that her father never believed in her, that she wasn't strong enough to carry his empire. Her hand hovered near the pen. Loretta's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. Don't you dare. Evelyn's head snapped toward her. Loretta stepped closer, her eyes burning. Don't you let that man steal what your daddy bled for. Don't you betray everything you just told me you wanted. The truth, the love, the chance to be seen. You sign that paper, and you hand your father's life work to a vulture. You hand him yourself. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn's chest tightened, tears. Loretta grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently. Listen to me. You are enough. You always were. You think Ricky Calloway built an empire just for some snake to snatch it while his daughter stood by? No, baby. He built it for you. To carry. To prove he was more than where he came from. You're his proof. Don't you forget it. Evelyn's hand trembled, but it withdrew from the pen. Marcus's expression darkened. You'll regret this. He snapped the portfolio shut and signaled the board members to follow him. The market won't wait for your emotions, Evelyn. When the collapse comes, don't come begging me for mercy. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The silence left in his wake was crushing. Evelyn collapsed into the chair, shaking, her face pale. She buried her hands in her hair, whispering, He's going to ruin everything. Loretta knelt beside her, steadying her with a hand. No, child. He ain't. You stronger than you think. But you gotta hold on. Before Evelyn could respond, alarms blared. Richard's monitor spiked, then flatlined into a chilling monotone. Daddy! Evelyn screamed, leaping to his side. Nurses and doctors flooded the room, shouting orders, pushing her and Loretta back. Code blue. Get the crash cart. Evelyn's knees buckled. Loretta caught her, holding her tight as doctors worked furiously. Compressions, injections, desperate commands. Evelyn buried her face against Loretta's shoulder, sobbing. No, no, please, not like this. For agonizing minutes, the room was chaos, the steady shriek of the monitor tearing through the air. Evelyn's world narrowed to that sound, that unrelenting note of death. Then, beep. Another. Another. The line steadied into rhythm again. Weak, but there. Richard clung to life. The doctors eased back, murmuring, He's stable for now. Loretta tightened her grip on Evelyn, whispering, See? He ain't letting go yet. He fightin', just like you. But Evelyn didn't feel hope. Not then. She felt the shatter, the terrifying realization that they could lose him any second, that time was slipping away, and that Marcus's threats were closing in like wolves at the door. She pressed her forehead against her father's frail hand, tears soaking his skin. Please, Daddy, don't leave me with this alone. The hospital room was a husk of exhaustion after the code blew. Machines hummed. Nurses moved in and out with hushed urgency. But the energy was different now. Fragile, heavy, as though one wrong breath might shatter everything. Evelyn sat slumped in the chair, her face pale, her eyes bloodshot. Her father's near death replayed in her head like a broken reel. The flat line, the shouts, the chaos, the desperate rhythm of chest compressions. She pressed her palms to her ears as if she could block it out, but the sound of the monitor's shriek lived inside her. Loretta sat nearby, her hands folded in her lap. For once, she didn't speak. She simply stayed. Present, steady, letting her silence hold Evelyn's storm. Finally, Evelyn whispered hoarsely, I thought he was gone. I thought that was it. Loretta's gaze softened. I thought so too. Evelyn looked at her father, his chest rising and falling weakly, his face pale and drawn. Do you think he even knows I'm here? Do you think he can hear me? Loretta nodded slowly. I do. Folks always think when a body goes quiet, they gone. But sometimes the soul hangs on, listening, waiting for a reason to stay. Evelyn bit her lip, fighting fresh tears. And what if I'm not reason enough? What if he doesn't want to stay for me? Loretta's heart ached at the words. She leaned forward, her voice low but firm. Child, don't you go down that road. You his daughter. You more than enough. But I know it's hard to believe that when all you ever wanted was to hear it out his mouth. Evelyn's throat worked. I don't think he ever will. The despair in her voice cracked Loretta's own composure. She stood abruptly, pacing toward the window. For years she had swallowed her grief, locked it tight. But now, the storm inside Evelyn mirrored her own losses too closely. My brother, Daryl. Loretta's voice shook, the name catching in her throat. He died in a hospital bed, not too different from this one. They said they tried everything, but I swear to this day, they didn't care enough to really fight. He was just another poor black man without insurance. And when he flatlined, they didn't fight half as hard as these doctors just did for Richard Calloway. Evelyn lifted her head, startled. She had never heard Loretta speak Daryl's name. Loretta pressed a trembling hand against the glass. I held his hand just like you hold your daddy's now. Begged him to stay. Promised I'd do better if he did. But he didn't. And when they wheeled his body away, I thought, what was the point? What was the point of me fighting for him all those years if he still ended up gone? Her shoulders heaved. She turned back, tears sliding down her cheeks. So don't you dare think I don't understand. I know exactly what it feels like to wonder if you enough. To wonder if your love even matters. The room pulsed with their shared pain. Two women from different worlds laid bare by grief. Evelyn stood, unsteady, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, wounded, broken, but seen. Then Evelyn whispered, "So what do we do? What if he dies, Loretta? What happens to me? To everything." Loretta crossed the room and took her hands, gripping them tight. "Then you live. You keep breathing, even when it hurts. You carry his name the way he carried it out of Harlem. Not with shame, but with pride. That's how you honor him. Not by letting snakes steal what's his. Not by letting fear eat you up." Evelyn shook her head, tears spilling. "I don't know if I can." "Yes, you can," Loretta said firmly, squeezing harder. "Because you ain't alone. Not no more." The words struck something deep in Evelyn. For the first time, she believed it, just a little. That maybe she wasn't as alone as she had always felt. They sat together in silence, their hands entwined, their grief breathing between them. Richard's monitor beeped softly, steady but fragile. Outside the room, the hospital bustled on, oblivious. Reporters crowded the sidewalks. The market shifted wildly, and Marcus Caldwell plotted his next move. But inside, two women sat at rock bottom, broken, questioning everything, their world hanging by a thread. And yet, in the ruins of despair, something fragile endured, the beginning of faith that survival, maybe even redemption, was still possible. The next morning, the sun spilled through the half-closed blinds, painting thin gold stripes across the sterile hospital room. Richard slept deeply, his breath shallow but steady. Evelyn dozed in the chair, her face pressed against her arm, exhaustion pulling her down. Loretta sat awake, as she often did, a quiet sentinel keeping watch. The door creaked open. A man in a simple navy suit slipped inside, holding a leather folder under his arm. He wasn't one of the doctors. They were easy to spot with their white coats and clipped voices. He wasn't a lawyer either, though the folder suggested business. His face was lean, marked with years of strain, but his eyes carried warmth. "Mrs. Evans?" he asked softly. Loretta straightened. "That's me. Who's a skin?" He stepped closer and extended a hand. "My name's Samuel Wright. I used to work for Mr. Calloway, years ago, back when he was just starting his first company. I heard about what happened. I came to pay my respects." Loretta eyed him warily, then shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not the grasp of a man looking for leverage. Evelyn stirred awake at the sound of voices. She sat up quickly, her eyes darting toward her father. Relief swept her face when she saw he was still breathing. Then her gaze landed on Samuel. "Who are you?" He nodded respectfully. "Evelyn Calloway, right? I worked for your father a long time ago. Back then, I was just a kid out of college, barely making ends meet. Your father gave me a shot. He pushed me harder than I thought I could handle, but he also mentored me when he didn't have to. I never forgot that." Evelyn frowned, uncertain whether to trust him. "Why are you here now?" Samuel hesitated, then opened his folder. Inside were handwritten notes, old contracts, photographs of Richard at company retreats. He pulled out one picture. Richard in his 30s, standing beside a much younger Samuel in a cramped office, both of them laughing. "Because," Samuel said softly, I owe him everything. And when I heard what Marcus Caldwell is trying to pull with the board, I knew I couldn't sit back. Loretta's eyes narrowed. So you know about that snake? Samuel nodded grimly. Marcus has been planning this for months. He's already rallied half the board to his side. They're using your father's condition as leverage, saying he's unfit to lead. If they succeed, everything Richard built, all of it, will be ripped out of your family's hands. Evelyn's heart sank. The weight of it all pressed down harder. And what do you expect me to do? I'm not my father. I don't even know how his world works. Samuel leaned forward, his voice steady. That's exactly why Marcus thinks he'll win. He's counting on you to fold. But Evelyn, your father didn't build an empire just for himself. He built it to last. He used to tell me, legacy is what survives when your voice can't. And right now, you are his voice. The words hit her like a blow. She looked at her father, frail and silent, and felt the chasm between who she was and who he had been. I can't, she whispered. I don't have it in me. Samuel studied her, then spoke more gently. Do you know what your father used to say about fear? He told me once, fear is just proof you're standing on the edge of something that matters. He was scared too, Evelyn. The difference is, he didn't let it stop him. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to reject the responsibility pressing in, but Samuel's words stirred something small, but undeniable. Loretta reached over and laid a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. You don't have to do it alone, baby. You got folks who'll stand with you. Me. Maybe even him. She nodded toward Samuel. Samuel smiled faintly. I'm not here to take anything. I don't want money or position. I just want to help protect what Richard built. For him, for you, for everyone who believed in him. If you'll let me. Evelyn looked between them, her chest heavy with doubt. For so long, she had felt like a shadow in her father's world, never measuring up. Now these strangers. Loretta with her fierce heart, Samuel with his loyalty, were asking her to step into the light. Her voice shook. What if I fail? Loretta squeezed her shoulder. Then you get back up. And you try again. Ain't no shame in Fallon, Evelyn. The only shame is letting folks like Marcus win without a fight. Silence stretched, thick but not suffocating. Evelyn finally let out a trembling breath and nodded slowly. Okay, I'll try, but I don't know where to start. Samuel opened his folder again and slid a document across the table. Start here. These are Marcus's moves. Proof he's been manipulating votes behind the scenes. If we can get this into the right hands, we might just have a fighting chance. Evelyn stared at the paper, her fingers trembling as she touched it. For the first time, the future didn't feel like an impossible void. It felt like a battlefield. Her father's monitor beeped steadily behind her, as though echoing the fragile rhythm of new resolve. And in that quiet room, Evelyn realized she wasn't powerless. She wasn't just the frightened daughter of a dying billionaire. She had a choice, to fight or to fold. With Loretta and Samuel beside her, maybe, just maybe, she could find the courage to fight. That night, the hospital quieted in a way that felt almost sacred. The corridors emptied, the hum of machinery softened, and the city outside dimmed into a distant murmur. Evelyn sat by the window, the skyline of Manhattan shimmering against the glass. Loretta rested across from her, knitting absent-mindedly, though her eyes never left Evelyn's face. The weight of Samuel's words and the folder of evidence sat heavy in Evelyn's lap. She traced her fingers over the edges, as though afraid the truth inside might cut her if she opened it too wide. He made it all look so easy, Evelyn whispered finally. Loretta looked up. Who? My father. Evelyn's voice cracked. He walked into every room like he belonged there. He made decisions without flinching. He never hesitated. And me? I can barely breathe in those spaces. I feel like a fraud every time I try. Like everyone can see, I don't belong. Loretta set down her knitting and leaned forward. You ever ask yourself why you feel that way? Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. Because I'm not him. No, Loretta said firmly. Because you've been told your whole life you're not enough. Maybe not with words, but with silence. With expectations so high no human could reach him. You grew up in a shadow, baby. That don't mean you ain't got your own light. Evelyn's throat tightened. She had spent years chasing approval that never came, bending herself into shapes she thought her father would finally recognize. But no matter what she achieved, it was never enough. I hate him for it sometimes, she admitted, her voice raw. And then I hate myself for hating him. What kind of daughter thinks like that when her father's lying here dying? Loretta's eyes softened, glistening. The kind who's honest. The kind who's been hurt. She paused, her voice trembling. You think I didn't feel that with my brother? Daryl was my whole world. I raised him more than our mama did. And still, he found his way into trouble, and I couldn't pull him out. When he died, I blamed him. I blamed myself. I blamed God. I carried that hate inside me for years. Evelyn listened, wide-eyed. Loretta rarely spoke of her past, but when she did, the words carried the weight of graves. What changed? Evelyn asked softly. Loretta sighed, her gaze distant. Nothing at first. I walked around angry, bitter, snapped at folks who didn't deserve it. Till one day, I realized all that hate was just keeping him dead inside me. I wasn't letting the good parts of him live on. His laugh, his music, the way he protected me when we were kids. I buried those parts right alongside him. Took me years to dig him back up. Her voice broke. And even now, some days I wonder if I'll ever forgive myself. The room went quiet, filled only by Richard's faint breathing and the rhythmic beep of the monitor. Evelyn felt her chest ache. I guess we're both haunted, she whispered. Loretta nodded. Maybe that's why we ended up here together. Two women carrying ghosts, sit and watch over a man who can't speak his truth. Maybe it's time we start speaking ours. Evelyn looked down at the folder again, then back at Loretta. What if I can't live up to it? What if I try to fight Marcus and lose everything? That'll mean I wasn't just weak. I'll be the reason my father's legacy dies. Loretta shook her head firmly. No, that ain't what it means. You losing don't erase what he built. It don't erase who you are. Trying, standing up when you scared. That's where the honor lives. That's where the legacy lives. And you'll be surprised how much strength you got when you stop letting fear run the show. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. And what about you? You talk about forgiving yourself for your brother, but have you? Really? Loretta swallowed hard. The knitting needles sat idle in her lap. Truth? No, not all the way. Some nights, I still hear his voice. Still see his face. Still think, if I'd just done one thing different, maybe he'd still be here. But then I look at you, sitting there, fighting to find your way. And I think, maybe God put me here to do better this time. To help somebody else carry a weight I couldn't carry back then. The words hit Evelyn deep. For so long, she had thought of Loretta as just the woman who kept her father's house in order, who brewed tea and offered small comforts. Now she saw the truth. Loretta was carrying her own battlefield inside her. And in her own way, she was just as scarred, just as human. Evelyn reached across the space between them and took Loretta's hand. Then let's try together. You forgive yourself, and I'll try to believe I'm enough. Loretta squeezed her hand, her eyes wet. Deal. For the first time in days, Evelyn let herself lean back, not in defeat, but in the fragile beginnings of peace. Her father lay silent. The future loomed uncertain, but inside that room, something shifted. Two women, one bound by blood, the other by circumstance, chose to stop letting ghosts dictate their worth. And in that choice, something stronger than fear began to grow. The next morning, Evelyn stood in the hospital corridor, Samuel's folder clutched tightly in her hands. The white walls around her seemed to press inward, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a cruel reminder of how small she still felt. Loretta stood by her side, steady as ever, her presence an anchor Evelyn didn't know she needed. Inside her father's room, Richard still lay unconscious. His chest rose and fell, shallow but steady, tethered to the machines that kept him hovering between life and loss. Evelyn looked back through the glass window at him. For most of her life, she had waited for him to make choices, to lead, to decide the course. Now the silence of his stillness made it painfully clear. This choice was hers. Samuel appeared at the end of the hall, his expression calm but intent. The board meeting is tomorrow, he said, his voice low. Marcus is pushing for a vote of no confidence. If he wins, the company falls into his hands. Evelyn swallowed hard. And if I show up? Samuel held her gaze. If you show up, you become the deciding voice. You're his legal proxy while he's incapacitated. But you won't just be a silent vote, Evelyn. Marcus will come for you. He'll try to humiliate you, break you down in front of everyone. He'll count on you backing away. Her hands trembled around the folder. She could see it already. Marcus's smirk, the board's skeptical eyes, her own voice faltering. The fear clawed at her, whispering she was too weak, too unprepared. I don't know if I can do it, she admitted, her voice cracking. Samuel stepped closer, his tone firm but not unkind. If you don't, Marcus wins. And your father's empire becomes his trophy. Evelyn, this is the moment. Either you step into it, or you let him erase everything your father stood for. Evelyn turned to Loretta, searching her eyes. What if I stand up there and fail? What if I embarrass myself? What if I ruin everything? Loretta's voice was steady, almost stern. Then at least you fail knowing you fought. Don't let fear decide for you, baby. Fear's a liar. It'll tell you standing still is safer. But standing still is how you lose without even giving yourself a chance. Evelyn blinked back tears, staring again at her father through the glass. His face, pale but strong even in weakness, seemed to watch her. She remembered Samuel's words. Legacy is what survives when your voice can't. Maybe this was what he had meant all along. Maybe her father's silence wasn't just weakness. It was space for her voice to finally matter. Her breath shook as she whispered, "Okay, I'll do it." Samuel's eyes softened. "Then we need to prepare? I'll coach you through the agenda. Loretta, you'll stay by her side, keep her grounded. Marcus won't expect her to walk." But Evelyn wasn't ready to let go of her fear so easily. "And if I freeze up? If my voice cracks? If?" Loretta stepped in, cutting her off with a hand on her shoulder. "Then you keep talking. Folks don't need you perfect. They just need you real. And real beats polished lies every time." The words pierced through her panic. For the first time, she realized she didn't need to be her father. She just needed to be herself, scared, trembling, but standing anyway. She nodded slowly, the decision settling inside her like a fragile flame. "I'll be there." Samuel exhaled, almost in relief. "Good. Then tonight, we go over everything. Tomorrow, we face Marcus head-on." Loretta squeezed Evelyn's hand, her eyes fierce. "You hear that? You not fasten him alone. You got us." For the first time in days, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't confidence yet, but it was the faintest taste of hope. Through the glass, her father's monitor beeped steadily, as though echoing her choice. He couldn't speak, couldn't guide her, but maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to. For once, Evelyn Calloway had chosen for herself. And tomorrow, the world would see whether she would rise or break. The next morning, the boardroom of Calloway Global gleamed like a stage set for war. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline of Manhattan, casting sharp light across the polished oak table where a dozen men and women sat in crisp suits. The air carried the scent of leather and fresh coffee, but beneath it pulsed a tension thick enough to choke on. At the head of the table sat Marcus Caldwell, his posture easy, his smile sharp. He drummed his fingers against the mahogany surface as he surveyed the room, a predator disguised as a gentleman. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said smoothly, "we all know why we're here. Richard Calloway, our respected founder, is incapacitated. For the good of this company, we must vote on new leadership." A murmur rippled through the room. Some nodded in agreement, others avoided his gaze, unwilling to oppose him openly. Marcus leaned back, confident. He was already savoring his victory. The double doors opened. Evelyn Calloway stepped inside. The room stilled. Whispers broke out like sparks. She was dressed in a simple navy dress, not the power suits her father favored, but her back was straight, her eyes steady. Loretta walked just behind her, carrying nothing but her presence, her gaze fierce as if daring anyone to underestimate Evelyn. Samuel followed, a quiet shadow with the folder tucked under his arm. Marcus's smile faltered for just a second before returning, smoother than glass. "Evelyn, how unexpected. I assumed you'd remain at your father's side." She met his gaze without flinching. "I am at my father's side. Right now, that means here." A ripple of surprise moved through the board. Marcus chuckled softly, dismissive. "This isn't a place for sentiment. This is business." "Are you certain you're prepared for that?" Her palms sweated, her throat tightened, but Loretta's earlier words echoed in her mind. "Folks don't need you perfect. They just need you real." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice quiet but clear. "You're right. I'm not my father. I don't have his years of experience. But I am his daughter, and I won't stand by while someone like you dismantles everything he built." The room went silent. Marcus tilted his head, studying her. Strong words. But words won't save this company. Leadership will. And forgive me, Evelyn, But what exactly do you bring to the table? Her chest tightened. For a moment, fear threatened to choke her. Then she caught Loretta's eyes, steady, unwavering, and Samuel's small nod of encouragement. She took a deep breath. What I bring is what this company has been missing under your influence, Marcus. Integrity, vision, and proof. Samuel slid the folder across the table. Papers spilled out. Emails, financial records, contracts exposing Marcus's manipulation of votes and underhanded dealings. Gasps echoed around the table. Board members leaned in, scanning the evidence with furrowed brows. Evelyn's voice steadied, gaining strength. This company was built on my father's name, but it thrived because people trusted him. Marcus wants power, but he doesn't care about trust. And without trust, there is no Callaway Global. Marcus's jaw tightened. This is slander. Half-truths and conjecture. One board member, an older woman with silver hair, looked up from the documents. It looks like more than conjecture, Marcus. These signatures, these are yours. The room buzzed with low voices. Marcus's calm facade began to crack. Evelyn pressed forward. I know I'm not the leader my father is, but I'm willing to learn, to fight, to honor what he built. If you give Marcus control, you hand this company to greed. If you stand with me, you stand with legacy. She paused, her heart hammering, then added softly, and if I fail, it won't be because I didn't try. It'll be because I dared to fight for what matters. The words weren't polished. They weren't perfect, but they were hers, raw, unshaken, real. For the first time, Marcus had no ready reply. He simply sat, jaw clenched, as the board members whispered among themselves. Loretta's lips curved in the faintest smile, pride glowing in her eyes. Samuel leaned back, relief washing across his face. Evelyn stood taller than she ever had before. She had faced the room, faced Marcus, faced her fear, and she had not broken. Something fragile but undeniable sparked inside her. Hope. The boardroom's hum of whispered voices quieted as Marcus Caldwell rose from his chair. His smile was gone now, replaced by a thin, hard line across his face. He straightened his tie slowly, as though buying time, then looked around the table with the precision of a general about to launch his final strike. Well, he began, his voice calm but edged with steel. I have to admit, Evelyn, you've grown a spine since I last saw you. I almost admire it. Almost. He stepped forward, sliding his own folder across the table. But since we're trading documents, allow me to present something that the board might find enlightening. Evelyn's stomach dropped. She hadn't known he'd come armed with evidence of his own. A board member opened the folder, flipping through pages. Gasps spread across the room. The older woman with silver hair frowned, then shot Evelyn a sharp look. Marcus's voice cut through the tension. These are records of Evelyn Callaway's past financial missteps. Bank statements showing lavish personal spending. Failed ventures funded with her father's money. Debts quietly covered by Richard himself. Is this the woman you want holding proxy over one of the largest corporations in America? The words sliced her open. She could feel every eye in the room burning into her. Her throat tightened, her palms clammy. Marcus pressed harder, his tone silky and cruel. Evelyn has lived her entire life in the shadow of her father's wealth, shielded from consequences. She has never built anything of her own, never shouldered true responsibility. And now she wants to play savior. The board murmured, doubt rippling like a wave. Marcus spread his arms, triumphant. Richard Callaway built this empire with brilliance and grit. Do we really believe his daughter, his fragile, spoiled daughter, can preserve it? Or is this company safer in the hands of someone who knows how to lead? Evelyn's chest constricted. Shame roared in her ears. Every insecurity she'd ever carried was laid bare before the people who had once respected her father. And the worst part was, Marcus wasn't lying. She had failed. She had wasted money, stumbled through projects, leaned too heavily on her father's safety net. Loretta shifted behind her, her jaw tight, her hands curling into fists. She whispered fiercely in Evelyn's ear, "Don't you let him do this. Don't you let him turn your scars into chains." But Evelyn felt frozen. Her voice, so steady moments ago, deserted her. What if Marcus was right? What if she was nothing more than a fraud standing in her father's shadow? Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice to a dagger-sharp whisper meant for her, but loud enough for the board to hear. "Sit down, Evelyn." before you embarrass yourself further." The words twisted like a knife. She glanced at Samuel, whose jaw clenched, but his eyes urged her to fight. Loretta's grip on her shoulder tightened, a silent lifeline. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory, not words he'd said to her, but ones Samuel had repeated. "Fear is just proof you're standing on the edge of something that matters." She was on the edge now. She could step back into silence, or step forward into fire. Her pulse thundered as she rose to her feet. The boardroom went silent. Her voice shook at first, but she forced it out. "Marcus is right." The words stunned even Loretta and Samuel. Murmurs broke out, sharp and disbelieving. Marcus's smirk returned, triumphant. Evelyn steadied herself, her hands trembling but her gaze locked on the board. "I have failed. I wasted money. I made mistakes. I leaned on my father more times than I can count. But do you know what that makes me?" She paused, breath sharp, eyes burning. "Human. Someone who knows what it feels like to fall flat on her face. Someone who knows what it costs to get back up." The murmurs shifted, curiosity flickering in the room. She continued, stronger now. "Yes, my father carried me. But he also taught me something Marcus will never understand. Leadership isn't about never failing. It's about what you do after you fail. Do you learn? Do you grow? Do you get back up and keep fighting for the people who believe in you?" Her voice rang clear, breaking through the tension. "I may not be perfect. I may not be polished. But I am not here to strip this company for power or profit. I'm here because my father believed legacy is about more than money. It's about people. And if you give Marcus control, that legacy dies." The room went still. Marcus's smirk faltered again, his jaw tightening. Evelyn's chest heaved, her whole body trembling. But she had not broken. The board members exchanged glances. Doubt still lingered, but something new flickered in their eyes too, respect. Marcus straightened, his mask of calm cracking just slightly. His final weapon had been met, not with silence, but with defiance. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, Evelyn wasn't just surviving it. She was fighting. The silence in the boardroom stretched, taut and electric. Outside the windows, the Manhattan skyline gleamed in the morning sun, but inside, the air felt heavy, as if everyone was holding their breath. Marcus Caldwell's fingers drummed on the table again, though this time the rhythm was sharp, impatient. He had expected Evelyn to crumble, to bow her head in shame. Instead, she had stood tall in her imperfection, and something about that unsettled him. Finally, one of the board members, an older man with a neatly trimmed beard, cleared his throat. "I've known Richard Calloway for over 20 years. He made mistakes too. Bold risks, some that failed spectacularly. But he owned them. What I just heard from Evelyn," he paused, glancing her way, "sounded a lot like Richard." A murmur of agreement rippled down the table. Marcus snapped his head toward the man. "Don't be fooled. Owning mistakes isn't the same as being fit to lead. This is billions of dollars at stake. And billions of lives." Evelyn interjected, her voice firm. She hadn't planned the words, but they tumbled out with conviction. "This company employs thousands of people, funds communities, shapes markets. It isn't just numbers on a balance sheet. It's people depending on us. My father never forgot that. Marcus already has." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of each board member. "I'm not here to pretend I'm flawless. I'm here to promise that I will fight for this company with every ounce of grit I have, because I've already been knocked down, and I know how to get back up. That's what leadership means." For a heartbeat, the room stayed silent. Then, the silver-haired woman set down the damning folder Marcus had presented earlier and folded her hands. "I'd rather trust someone who admits their failures than someone who hides behind manufactured perfection." The tide shifted. Board members began murmuring, nodding, some openly looking at Marcus with suspicion instead of confidence. Marcus's composure cracked. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. She's inexperienced, reckless. Better inexperienced than corrupt," another board member muttered. Loretta, standing by Evelyn's side, folded her arms, her expression fierce with pride. Samuel let out a quiet breath, the corners of his lips lifting as if he'd known this moment was coming all along. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, his voice rising. "You can't seriously consider putting this child in charge. She'll destroy everything Calloway built." Evelyn took a step closer, her fear gone now, her voice cutting through his fury like glass. "No, Marcus. What destroys a legacy isn't failure, it's greed. And everyone in this room knows which one of us represents that. The words struck like a hammer. Marcus's mouth opened, but no reply came. His arguments, his threats, his carefully polished performance, all of it seemed to crumble in the face of Evelyn's raw truth. The silver-haired woman turned to the rest of the board. I call for an immediate vote. Marcus spun toward her. You can't. But the room had already shifted, the momentum ripped from his grasp. The members leaned toward one another, whispering quickly, urgently. A hand rose. Then another. Then another. Evelyn's breath caught. She hadn't expected the swell of support to come so fast, so decisive. For so long, she had been the doubter, the outcast in her own story. And yet here they were, choosing her, not because she was flawless, but because she had finally shown them who she really was. Marcus's face darkened, fury flashing in his eyes. He looked less like a leader now and more like a desperate man watching his empire slip away. The silver-haired woman raised her hand last, her voice calm and resolute. The board recognizes Evelyn Calloway as acting head of Calloway Global. The words rang like a bell through the room. Loretta exhaled sharply, tears stinging her eyes though she quickly blinked them away. That's my girl, she whispered under her breath. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at Evelyn with quiet pride. Evelyn herself could hardly breathe. She had come into this room trembling, afraid, unworthy. And now she was standing at the head of her father's company. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real. Marcus's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. His voice was low, venomous. You'll regret this. All of you. He swept the room with a glare, his eyes lingering on Evelyn like a promise of war. Then he strode toward the doors, slamming them shut behind him. The board sat in stunned silence. For the first time in years, Calloway Global had chosen a leader not because of power or politics, but because of heart. Evelyn inhaled deeply, her hands trembling at her sides. She wasn't naive. She knew Marcus would strike again, harder. But she also knew something else now. She could face him. Because hope wasn't fragile anymore. It was alive, burning inside her. The boardroom slowly emptied, its tension dissolving into murmurs of astonishment. Some members offered Evelyn nods of respect as they left, others tentative smiles, but all carried the weight of having witnessed something irreversible. Evelyn remained behind, standing near the tall windows as the skyline shimmered in the fading light of late afternoon. The city pulsed with life below, horns blaring, voices rising in a chorus of movement. It struck her that this was what her father always saw from this vantage point. Not just numbers, not just power, but a living world their choices impacted. Loretta approached first, her step steady, her face softening as she reached Evelyn. You did it, baby. You stood tall, even when your knees wanted to buckle. Richard would be proud. Evelyn turned, her throat tightening. I couldn't have done it without you. You saw what no one else did, what even I couldn't see in myself. Loretta shook her head gently, her eyes glistening. No, Evelyn. All I did was remind you. The strength was already yours. Sometimes it just takes a storm to see how strong the tree roots really are. Samuel joined them, his quiet presence grounding the moment. The documents you presented, they'll protect you from Marcus legally. But make no mistake, he's not finished. He'll try something again. You'll need to stay vigilant. Evelyn nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Yet, for the first time, it didn't crush her, it anchored her. Then I'll be ready. I won't let him take this company. Not from my father, and not from the people who depend on us. A silence followed, filled not with fear, but with resolve. Hours later, Evelyn returned to the hospital. The beeping monitors and sterile smell greeted her like a harsh reminder that one battle was still unresolved. Her father lay motionless, the same as he had for weeks, his strong hands limp against the white sheets. She sat beside him, taking his hand gently into hers. Dad, it's me. I don't know if you can hear me, but I fought for you today. For us. Marcus tried to take everything, but I didn't let him. I finally found my voice. And if you wake up, I'll prove to you that I can carry this legacy. Not perfectly, but with heart. Her voice cracked, tears spilling freely now. I need you to come back. I need to know you see me. The room was still, save for the rhythmic beep of the monitor. Evelyn bowed her head, her shoulders trembling. Loretta standing quietly behind her like a sentinel of love and strength. And then, a flicker, a faint squeeze against her fingers. So slight she almost thought she imagined it. Evelyn's head jerked up, her eyes wide. "Dad!" Another flicker, this time unmistakable. His eyelids trembled, then slowly, painfully, they opened. Richard Calloway's gaze, bleary but alive, found his daughter's. A groan escaped his lips, weak yet undeniable. Evelyn." His voice was raspy, broken from disuse. A sob burst from her throat as she leaned forward, clutching his hand tightly. "Yes, Dad, it's me. I'm here. We're all here. You're going to be okay." Loretta gasped softly, pressing a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Samuel stepped closer, his normally stoic face alight with relief. Richard blinked, his brow furrowing as he tried to take in the room. His gaze landed back on Evelyn, searching. What happened?" Evelyn wiped her tears, her voice unsteady but proud. "Marcus tried to take the company, but I stopped him. I stood up, Dad, just like you always wanted me to." His lips curved into the faintest smile, his strength barely enough to hold it. "That's my girl." The words shattered something inside her, replacing the years of doubt with a flood of belonging. She had always been enough, he had always seen it. And now, finally, she saw it too. The nurse rushed in, startled by the sound of his voice, quickly checking his vitals. The beeping monitors confirmed it. Richard Calloway was back. Weak, frail, but alive. As Evelyn sat by his side, her hand never leaving his, Loretta placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You've already proven yourself, baby. The rest is just living it out." The next weeks passed in a blur of recovery and rebuilding. Richard regained strength, slowly but steadily, though he insisted Evelyn remain the face of the company. The board rallied behind her, seeing in her the spirit of the man who had built Calloway Global from nothing. Marcus vanished from the spotlight, his threats echoing in the distance, but Evelyn no longer feared his shadow, because she was no longer standing alone. She had Samuel's guidance, Loretta's fierce love, her father's pride, and, most of all, her own belief in herself. On the day Richard was discharged from the hospital, Evelyn stood beside him and Loretta as cameras flashed outside. The billionaire, once written off as a dying relic, smiled proudly as he introduced the world to the woman who would carry his name forward. Evelyn Calloway, no longer the frightened daughter hiding in the background, but the leader who had found her voice in the storm. And at her side, always, the woman who had seen her before anyone else did, Loretta Johnson, the housekeeper who noticed what 30 top doctors had missed, not just in Richard's failing body, but in Evelyn's hidden strength. Together, they stepped forward into the blinding light of a future no one could have predicted, their scars proof of battles fought and won, their bond unshakable. Because in the end, it wasn't perfection that saved them. It was love. So, my beautiful family, this story reminds us that true strength does not come from perfection, wealth, or titles. It comes from courage and authenticity. Evelyn spent her life doubting herself, believing she was never enough. But when everything was at stake, she discovered that leadership isn't about never failing. It's about standing up, being real, and choosing integrity over fear. Loretta's role teaches us that wisdom and value are not tied to social class or position. Sometimes the world overlooks the very people who carry the greatest insight, compassion, and clarity. Her ability to see what the doctors missed not only saved a life, but unlocked Evelyn's true power. The heart of this story is simple: never underestimate yourself, and never underestimate others. Greatness can emerge from the unlikeliest of places. So, I leave you with this question: have you ever been underestimated by family, co-workers, or even yourself, and later proved them wrong? How did it change you?
Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, then you'll absolutely love the next. It's even crazier and more captivating than you can imagine. So go ahead and click the video showing right here on your screen, and I'll see you in the next story.